to Talking Supply Chain. In each episode, top supply chain industry professionals and the nation's top thought leaders join host Brian Strait and share their unique insights to help supply chain managers stay one step ahead of their competition. This is Talking Supply Chain.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Talking Supply Chain. I'm your host, Brian Strait, and on today's episode, we're diving into procurement and specifically supplier relationship management. For years, procurement has been viewed as a cost center, tactical, transactional, focused on the savings targets and the compliance. Sales teams, on the other hand, have had customer relation management systems that treat customers as strategic assets. Procurement teams, though, remain focused on cutting costs. But what if there's a better way? What if, instead of treating suppliers as vendors, we view them as strategic partners working with us to achieve shared goals? In the era of supply volatility, AI, geopolitical risks, and margin pressures, the old model just isn't working as much anymore. But what if we start to think about supplier relationship management as an operating system of procurement? Suddenly, I think the equation changes. Joining me today to help us do that is Sam Jenks, Chief Revenue Officer at Kodiak Hub and host of the Way We Source podcast. Sam, welcome to the show. It's great to talk to you.
Brian, thank you so much, and so happy to be on. Thanks for that intro as well. I think you made some important points that I'm looking forward to diving into.
Yeah, we're going to get to some of those things and who knows what else along the way as we go. Before we do that, I do always like to give everybody, all my guests, a chance to kind of talk a little bit about themselves and their companies, just so our audience understands who it is and what expertise you have. So do you mind sharing just a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Kodiak Hub and what you guys actually do?
Absolutely. So, avid marketer and salesperson myself, I definitely have a passion for technology and startups and the chaos that that brings, the controlled chaos that that brings in a growth venture. Kodiak Hub, I was actually the third hire of this particular business and have been in the space of procure tech before procure tech, I think, was even known as a tech category, and very proud to be part of some of those formative years where I think growth ventures became the challengers to some of the broader source to pay legacy suites that have been out there for years and years. Um, Personally, have a wife and a blind dog, poor guy, but he's hanging in there. We love him. And other than that, living currently in Boston, where Kodiak is expanding right now into the United States market as well, which I'm leading.
As a New Englander myself, from Rhode Island originally and now in Connecticut, I'm happy to talk to another New Englander and a Bostonian nonetheless.
Yeah.
On top of it. So.
Well, I hate to disappoint too much. I'm getting definitely into the mood and the swing of things when it comes to lobster rolls and Guinness. With that being said, I'm originally from Wilmington, Delaware, but I'm an East Coast boy nonetheless. But I've been living in Stockholm,
Yeah.
Sweden, where the company's headquartered the last few years as well.
No, well, that's fine. Sweden's a wonderful place. I've been there a number of times too, and if I had to go
Indeed,
somewhere, I may move to Sweden if I have to move somewhere. So it's a
you're
great
more than
place.
welcome.
Let's dive in. Enough of the boring talk about communities and things. We could go on for hours and whatnot. I don't think that's why people are tuning in to listen to us today. So let's get into our topic, if you don't mind. Um, I want to start off with the idea of procurement. I think has always been viewed as a tactical process within the business rather than a strategic. Can you talk a little bit about that? Kind of explain why we maybe have always viewed procurement as a tactical approach and why we don't consider it strategic.
Yeah. You make me think of a time when we went to go and visit a customer, a large telecom organization in the UK with a global footprint. And their CPO said to us that literally when they started, procurement was in the basement and physically in the basement. You had to go to floor -2 in the skyscraper that they worked in central London to be able to meet anyone in the procurement organization. Now, I think that obviously, well, that depicts a pretty grim picture of the position that a procurement organization has in a broader enterprise. Today, I think that it's hard to ignore that procurement has moved from being a more operational order taking function to being a very strategic function.
Mhm.
Everybody was on LinkedIn a few years ago talking about this seat at the table. And I once had a podcast guest myself tell me, why the heck are we worrying about the seat at the table? We bought the table, right? You can create your own table. And I think that there is an aspect that, you know, with the VUCA market that we're living in, we've just experienced a global pandemic, resource shortages, global tariffs, and geopolitical strife. Supply chains are not only, in focus in global enterprises, they're in focus in the world, right? They are geopolitical, they're mission critical. And I think that that I would say, culmination has brought about a time period, a time stamp now where procurement is really in focus in a lot of these global enterprises.
Yeah. It's the analogy of coming out of the basement, like that that gets me. The dark things. A lot of good things happen in basements. Batman kind of lived in a cave. So
Indeed.
maybe procurement is taking the same route and coming out of the cave and saving the organization, right? So
Maybe so.
so I mentioned in the beginning sales, right? I made the analogy to sales a little bit. It's something that
Yeah.
you've argued for, I think, and I've seen some past material from you that do you believe that relationship management in procurement should be viewed much the same way that sales views a customer relationship management or CRM program? Can you explain what you mean by that and why you think that analogy works?
Well, I think that the nucleus of Kodiak Hub starts with our founder and CEO, and she was fed up with seeing people running around with glossy systems like myself in sales and marketing. Why in the heck would I have a fantastic system of record operating system to manage my prospective deals, my
Hmm.
current deals, and my customer life cycle when procurement is still managing things with the ERP system and, of course, Excel and Microsoft Office? Now, of course, inequity doesn't drive, a reason for new technology, but the fact is that procurement, particularly in global multinationals, is managing billions of dollars often, right? At least hundreds of millions. And the fact is that if the technology stack doesn't match the level of weight that comes with that spend, then of course there's a discourse. There's some really interesting statistics that show that procurement, as the jobs to be done, they're surmounting, right? You said it yourself. The prior role of procurement is known to a lot of people in industry as a cost saver and a risk manager, right? With that being said, you start to pile on these new challenges and responsibilities that a procurement organization has. Create transparency and make sure that you have compliant products that are up to ESG standards. Oh, and by the way, ensure that you have a resilient supply chain and an agile line of supply. And so if things go wrong on the other side of the world, we can be able to shift, right, to a different supplier that is secured. Oh, and by the way, make sure that you're bringing new products and services to market. You're innovating continuously together with our supplier base. And
Mhm.
all the while, make sure that you get it to me at the right cost, on time, with the right level of quality. This kind of building expectation on the role has not been matched by the technology that these individuals have. Procurement lacks an operating system. And this is not something that I, in any way, shape, or form, am just advocating for because I work at a supply relationship management solution vendor. This is hard facts. We did a study together with ProcureTech prior to their acquisition by Oro Labs. And of course, the ProcureTech 100 has now been taken over Art of Procurement. Super happy to see that continued on in that legacy. But when ProcureTech was still working as an analyst body, we did a study together with them that showed that 72% of procurement teams are still managing their supplier relationships, quality, data, documentation, performance, and collaboration in a mix of Excel solutions and homegrown solutions. Now, you tell me, if you were to go out to sales organizations, would you hear that number? Yeah, maybe 72%, but it would be flipped in the other direction. 72% of those teams would have Salesforce, HubSpot, some other emerging CRM solution, if not one of the big two, right? And I think that that exact inequity in the two roles is very uh, it's a tough pill to swallow, I think, for a lot of people like ourselves that are supporting with the tech stack. With that being said, I think that if you stop looking at procurement as a role player, a function to solely save money, and you start looking at the true strategic value that they have to be able to add to a business, well, then it flips that equation on its head, right? This is a solution and, if, for example, technology that can be able to drive forward relationships with vendors in the same way that a CRM helps to be able to be the system of record to be able to drive forward sales.
Yeah, those numbers are interesting. The number of people still using Excel and other systems. But I wonder, because I hear that same thing when I talk to other people in supply chain in other areas, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, yes, I understand, sales may be much more forward with this, with the management systems, but I think a lot of logistics and supply chain is still handled that way.
Mm.
Right. So I don't know that necessarily procurement, and maybe that's just a function of procurement being kind of in the supply chain space and not in the finance space, for instance, right? Or the sales space, um, that you get those. But I wanted to ask you about the concept, because when we talk about this, when we manage in spreadsheets, right? I think we manage things as transactions in that way, right?
Mm.
Because it's a number on the spreadsheet. So there's no, it is what it is, right, on the spreadsheet. So what happens to organizations on the inside there when they're managing their suppliers is just simply a transaction and the relationship is just a transactional relationship? We pay you, you do this for us, right? As opposed to treating that supplier, that vendor, as an asset that can actually help you achieve the goal that you have, right?
Yeah.
How does that change what happens in the organization?
Well, I mean, here's the fact, right, Brian? Like, there's no problem with a spreadsheet. The problem is that it is a point in time. It is not a
Mhm.
life cycle approach. And I think that utilizing, for example, or how would I say, settling more so for the status quo in a business to manage a global supplier base that you're potentially placing orders for hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, it's not sustainable over time. Why?
Mhm.
Is because you need to increase your FTEs to be able to continue to actually keep abreast the surmounting data backlog that you're building, right? Now, again, the Excel spreadsheet itself is not the problem. It's what that Excel spreadsheet really brings, right? Which is it's okay to stick with the status quo. And what we know is that procurement organizations have a very tough time getting investment in technology. Gartner came out with the statistics, and it's a little bit stale at this point in time. It's from 2024. Nonetheless, I think it still frames up this particular topic pretty well. That procurement teams get only 17% of the technology that they want to be able to invest in. What does that
Hmm.
mean? If I want 10 solutions in my procurement or supply chain organization, I get two of them. Okay. Now, that's fair. You can't have all the technology in the world. But what exactly is hindering a business to invest more money in a function that has a surmounting level, no, excuse me, number of expectations and priorities, but is not growing in that same linear function when it comes to FTEs?
Yeah, interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess, I mean, hey, we can always update the spreadsheet, right? Somebody has to have that job, right? Right? They could just update it. But as you do this, as you look at this, I mean, I think what you're talking about kind of is a mind shift change for the way procurement operates, right? And from the transactional spreadsheet-based system to a modern system that uses technology. And I think that's where you get into the operating system concept of this, right?
Yeah.
And how you talk about supplier relationship management systems as an operating system, and it should be something that is foundational to what you do in procurement
Yeah.
and not just another tool that you add, another technology. I mean, I always go back to a survey. I mean, it's old now. It's probably 3 years old now, and I don't remember who at this point who even put it out. But like, there was a survey of procurement professionals, I think it was like 72% or something, said that we don't want more technology. We want to know what to do with the technology we have. You're
Mm.
advocating for putting more technology in,
Hmm.
to do this. So can you talk to me about the adding the technology and taking this concept and making it an operating system that, so I guess that's rethinking the way we think about procurement, right?
Yeah. It's an interesting topic that you bring up here, right? And I like to be able to talk a little bit about the space of source to pay, if you don't mind, right? If we
Hmm.
take a step back to talk about the aspect of technology in the broader sense of source to pay. So the source to pay process has long been, again, source to contract and procure to pay, broken down into kind of those distinct areas. SRM, contract management, strategic sourcing, analytics on spend, automated payments, master data management, all of these elements have been kind of subsets of one of those two broader areas of source to contract and procure to pay. And I think that the way that businesses long who have at least adopted something, right, a broader legacy platform, right? Not to name names, I'm sure that your listeners already know who those platforms are, and some of them work very well for a lot of businesses. But the legacy source to pay platforms, of course, promised a lot to be able to do both source to contract and procure to pay in those ancillary areas, right? I think what we've noticed is that over time, again, businesses are moving towards a more best of breed approach, a more integrated approach. And I think that the primary reason being is because what we're advocating for at Kodiak is not another technology system, but again, a solution that can help to be able to embed some of those processes and workflows that are so crucial to supplier relationship management, so crucial, in fact, to the strategic initiatives of a brand, particularly a brand, for example, that is in a highly regulated space or an area, for example, where the goods and materials that they're buying, the quality truly matters, right? And what I mean by that, if you take a simple example, is third-party risk management, right? What is third-party risk management exactly? Well, a lot of businesses would say that, well, I get a financial result over there from my finance team in Dun& and Bradstreet, and then I go to my risk and compliance team and speak to them, and they get me a result from Moody's, and then I go back to, for example, somebody else that's working within the space, and I make sure that I understand, in my risk and compliance context, is there any type of contextual, geopolitical, or global risks? I maybe would go into another data source and understand, for example, what the health and safety aspects are or the ESG aspects. And then, of course, I would reach out to the supplier and try and make sure that I get some more information from them in my spreadsheets. And I would collate all of these things and try and build up a 360-degree picture of this particular supplier. Now, what we mean of being the operating system is to remove those conversations, embed that third party risk management, top it up with capabilities related to onboarding and quality management, performance management, collaboration, and the ability to be able to automate some of those very crucial internal workflows that people are today managing via ping pong in their emails, right? So, what we're advocating for more than anything is to have a more integrated approach to a source to pay process where supplier relationship management is treated as a life cycle approach, not something that you do as a snapshot in time, right? And I think maybe the reason why SRM it's a space that, for example, is still growing, right? And we see it ourselves, right? And the reason being potentially is because, as I heard from a podcast guest that I had on once, it's hard to put bookends on. Where does supplier relationship management start and where does it stop? I think one could say the exact same for customer relationship management. Where does it start and where does it stop, right? And where does the technology supporting it start and where does it stop? I think that our solution is very much focused on taking people beyond the world of SRM, the SRM of yesteryear. And we have to respect where SRM comes from. Peter Kralik, right, published for the Harvard Business Review a particular matrix that was kind of the birth of supplier relationship management, being able to segment a supplier base into four different quadrants, understanding are they a leverage, bottleneck, critical, strategic vendor. And from there, you could be able to start managing that relationship in a particular way. That is the starting point for supply relationship management. What we want to be able to offer and become is, of course, the operating system to not just help them to be able to segment vendors, but to manage intake, assess, conduct risk management, due diligence, negotiate contracts, onboard and qualify the right suppliers, audit quality, track performance and spend, and then correct and develop those vendors so you can innovate with the best vendors and start the cycle all over again, right? What this does is that it really creates a flywheel, and it takes the approach of SRM as not just a snapshot of time, again, a row and column in a spreadsheet that somebody needs to go and update, but a proactive, ongoing approach that not only covers the operational, but also the tactical and strategic elements of the relationship that a procurement organization or supply chain organization has together with a vendor.
So as you're talking about that, and you mentioned capabilities, you mentioned a bunch of things. You're bringing out third-party risk management, onboarding, et cetera. And obviously, all the things that we all know that you have to do when dealing with suppliers.
Mhm.
I guess the thought that came into my mind is a true supplier relationship management system or concept, is it the technology that you're offering, or is it the mindset to incorporate and tie all these things together?
Yeah. So we're offering the technology, just to be clear, we're a software as a
Right.
service provider. But if we talk about what a good SRM program looks like, well, it's the classic, right? It's the equation or the model, the Venn diagram that's as old as time. The overlap of people, process, and technology. Now, you know, process guided by technology, that's where you have pockets of automation, right?
Mhm.
Technology that guides your people, well, that's where you can be able to work more efficiently, right? And people and process, of course, well, then you have alignment. You can be able to work in a more streamlined manner with more governance across the business, okay? But it is these three things, of course, working in tandem, and any good program within SRM has a blend of those particular things. I think the reason why we have to be so bullish and strong-headed and have a point of view on what SRM is because, again, as I mentioned, SRM is still in a formative state.
Okay. So I want to shift gears just a little bit.
Sure.
One of the things that's top of mind for supply chain people today is resilience, right? We've got all sorts of pressures, geopolitical, I mean, all sorts of things happening, right? Tariffs. So
Mm.
does implementing an SRM program or an SMR technologies, right? Does that help us improve resilience in some way? Is that something that procurement professionals could look at as a way to help with their resiliency?
Yes, simple answer, right? I mean, here's the thing. We're in a VUCA market. Businesses are, of course, having to scramble more often than not. Not a good position to be in, okay? With that being said, with a system of record, with a operating system like an SRM, one
Mhm.
can be able to be proactive and ensure that, for example, they have a active or sorry, a unactive but approved vendor list that they can be able to go to when times get tough. They can be able to also map where their commodities are, right? So that when the next tariff hits, they can be able to understand, well, what is the country of manufacturing, right? And how will we be impacted when it comes to our bottom line of purchasing from supplier X, Y, and Z? It provides this, as everybody likes to say, agile mode of operating, right? Now, is the supply relationship management technology itself the golden ticket, right? The silver bullet? Absolutely not, right? True resilience comes from a a approach that is collaborative with vendors and making sure that you share the hard times and the bads. And I understand that that's so much easier said than done, but I heard somebody say recently at an event that you work with your suppliers because you can't do it, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't go out to market. And I think that we so often treat vendors as just that, right? A PO. We cut them the check and
Okay.
they should do the job. They should get the materials there on time. We need to make sure that we're having collaborative relationships with vendors, right? Particularly those vendors that are strategic. And that comes back to the reason why SRM is so important, because I need to be able to segment who is truly important to me. Where do I have a material that, for example, I have no other line of supply and I spend a lot of money. Well, that's a potential vendor that I need to be able to be close to, right? Because otherwise it's a bottleneck for my business if I can't be able to purchase from that particular vendor. And I think that these are the other aspects that SRM can be able to offer, is to be able to frame who are my vendors to me and how should I treat them.
Yeah. So I want to I'm going to kind of ask you something. I'm going to ask you to hold off on answering this though, but I want you to in a few minutes to make the case as to why you should adopt a strong SRM program. But before we do that, I want to ask you a couple of financial concepts here because,
Hmm.
as you know, the CFOs hold the purse strings in any organization, right? And they see one thing and one thing only, and it's dollars,
Mm.
right? So if you are a procurement guy and you say, I'm going to go to the CFO, I want to make the case, I want to adopt this SRM system and whatnot. How do I make that case to the CFO? Yeah, I assume I've got to show him some sort of both either financial or metric improvements. Maybe it's in the margins, lead times, and inventory on hand, things, whatever the case may be. So will an organization see measurable improvement in some of these metrics? And is that the best way to make the case to the CFO?
Yeah. You bring up a good point, right? What is the ROI, right? I think that for us, you have to be able to get beyond the basic operational savings. For
Mhm.
example, FTE, right? I think what SRM provides is an opportunity to be able to reduce rogue and tail spend by improving processes for intake and qualification of vendors, right? Keeping sourcing and procurement in the loop earlier. There is, of course, the operational aspect there as well when it comes to being able to make the day-to-day more efficient of manual and administrative tasks, right? That otherwise are bogging people down. Something as simple as updating a data row, chasing down a vendor, trying to be able to manage a really robust qualification process via email, right? All of these things that otherwise are low value tasks, right? And obviously, technology can help us to be able to reposition ourselves in a place where we're working more tactically and more strategically. And when it's all said and done, it has to be tied to a strategic initiative. Right. And what is that strategic initiative? Well, it might be bringing better services and products to the market. It might be, for example, safeguarding brand and shareholder value. When it's all said and done, you need to be able to build a case at an operational, tactical, and strategic level to make sure that you are, again, within that 20% of people that are getting the technology that they ask for, right?
Yeah.
The one thing that I think is often missed or often lost is the cost of inaction, right? And nobody wants to be able to build a case based on fear. But the fact is that if you do not act, if you do stay in the status quo, what is the cost of that, right? I think that there's an analogy that I love that I heard once at a sales conference, in fact, that I think is very relevant to this particular topic when it comes to COI or cost of inaction, which I think is very rarely utilized in internal business cases as well.
Mhm.
Let's say that, for example, I live in downtown Chicago, and downtown Chicago has, for example, 10 days of rain every single month, okay, on average. I typically walk to the office, right? And I bring along with me, for example, an umbrella. Okay. But one day I forget my umbrella and somebody's trying to sell me a raincoat. That umbrella costs $10, but the raincoat costs $100. Now, why in the heck would I ever buy a raincoat for $100 when I have, for example, my $10 umbrella? There's no reason. I bring my umbrella with me. I stay dry. I can get to the office. I can get back. But oh crap, I forgot my umbrella one day. Now I need to be able to take an Uber. And what do we know about Uber? Well, when it rains, there's surge prices. On average, I take an Uber that it maybe costs $10, but surge prices makes that Uber $20, right? Five Ubers out of those 10 rainy days because sometimes I'm forgetful, I'm busy. 50% of the time I forget my umbrella. Well, 10 times out of the month it's raining, five of those times I take a surge price Uber. That same cost can be matched against the one-time purchase of the rain jacket, right? That I could be able to roll up and keep in my book bag and keep me dry at any point in time. And I think when you look at cost of inaction, it creates this same exact same exact analogy, but in a business context, of course, what is it costing you to do nothing? What is your risk exposure, right? What contracts are you potentially losing out on because your customers expect you to be able to be managing your suppliers in a particular way? I think that these are the types of things that that is speaking the CFO's language, right? And I think that there needs to be a balance between operational, tactical, and strategic gain when it comes to ROI, but there also needs to be an element of cost of inaction.
Yeah. It's not that argument, I think, to me is it's not that dissimilar to the argument that I've heard for e-commerce companies in the online shopping experience, right? If the customer gets, how often does the customer put an item in their basket and then not buy it because that process was not smooth and easy
Correct.
in the end there, right? And the company doesn't do anything to make that better, right? They just lose the
Correct.
customer. So I think it's a similar analogy there, similar idea concept. The as the argument is made to the CEO and CFO by the procurement leaders,
Yeah.
do they make that argument? Hey, this is what these guys are important. This as you just outlined, these are the arguments we're going to make as for why we need to do this. But internally, within the procurement organization, are
Yeah.
they able to shift the focus of kind of what they do? Because I think they've always traditionally been focused on cost savings, right? Getting the best, yes,
Mm,
best price, get best lead time, whatever the metric that you needed to meet for that
mm.
particular item. Are they able to shift in any way using an SRM system from maybe maybe savings focus where that's 95% of the process to maybe that's 70%, and now we've got 30% of our thought process is how do we add value
Well,
in
let
what
me
we're
ask you a
doing?
question, Brian. If I'm bogged down in low value tasks and my job is to be able to create cost savings, how am I going to do that? So I think that it comes back to, again, the removal of menial and low value tasks directly impacts an individual, right? A category manager, a strategic sourcing manager, a director or VP of supply chain or alike to be able to be more strategic. It allows their teams to be more strategic. That
Yeah,
gives more time back to be able to create opportunities for not only value creation with the vendor base, but also savings. So I think within itself, it creates, SRM itself is not, again, the silver bullet, but removing menial low value tasks is the start to anyone getting more time to actually deliver upon what is their primary KPIs.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So and to answer your question, I think I would just tell you to work harder, right?
Sure, sure, sure.
Work harder.
Do more with less
Do
faster,
more,
right?
right? That's always been the traditional answer, of course, right? I'm old school, so we're gonna go with that. I want to a couple questions left in our time together today. You've kind of talked a little bit about this. I don't think we've spoken specifically about AI yet. I just want to know, where does AI fit in an SRM system? I mean, what are you guys doing with it, or is it playing an important role?
It's a playing an important role in any software as a service, right? I mean, you look at, for example, AI, and the way that we look at AI is that it is the driving the steering wheel to the car, right? We don't view AI as a separate entity to our software. It is deeply embedded, right?
Hmm.
Now, we are a software as a service, and that also comes with its own benefits. We have access, for example, to company proprietary data. We have a data architecture that can stand the test of time in global enterprises. AI, however, has allowed our solution and our users to leverage our solution in brand new ways. An intelligence layer that they can be able to prompt and extract particular insights that otherwise maybe they would have to go view a dashboard for example.
Yeah,
OCR capabilities that can extract SLAs or expiry dates from documents that otherwise somebody would have to input the data point when they're uploading that particular document. Prompt capabilities that could create, for example, a 8-step corrective action for an 8D or a PPAP process that otherwise I would have to manually create. the culmination of all of these things, again, leads back to removing low value tasks within our platform. And of course, it delivers direct value to the end user as well. But I think the one thing that we focus on is every single item as to what it is that we're delivering. I say every single item, meaning every single feature and functionality. How can this be supercharged by the amazing technology that we have at our fingertips, which is AI? And I think it's around and it's real, right? It's not blockchain. It is deeply embedded, but there is a lot of teams, right? We're at the beginning of that bell curve right now. The early adopters are getting out there and getting active. The fact is that there is a lot of teams that still hold skepticism, right? There's a lot of teams that still are in a status quo that is very far away from an AI native team. Our focus is to be able to meet the market where they are there as well, right? And understand that not everybody is at the same place. And I think that that's the most important piece within this explosion of AI technology, right? You don't need to be able to vibe code your way to being an AI native procurement organization. You can also be able to do it step by step and iteratively, right? And I think that
Yeah.
the expectation of a big boom is a dangerous one, and it's a unfair one to have on ourselves and on our teams. And that's why we talk a lot about how can we pave that pathway to supporting world-class procurement teams on their journey towards being more AI native.
Yeah. Yeah. AI is such a fascinating conversation these days, and there is so much internally and external pressure on
Yeah,
organizations to adopt AI that there are so many that just adopt AI because of those pressures, right? You want to play with the big boys, so why adopt AI? And you don't do it correctly because you're not doing it right. You're not right. You don't have the right use case. You're trying to do it too big at once. I mean,
right.
there's so many. I mean, everybody out there, some people have been very successful, but there's probably a lot of people listening and say, "Yeah, that's what we did." You know, we did that. We put in too much at once, and we overwhelmed ourselves with it. And um, so the incremental steps and you'll get there
Well, I'm
doing
not
that.
sure if you listened to 20 VC with Harry Stebbings by any chance.
No, I haven't heard that.
So he just had on the CEO and I believe one of the founders of Monday.com, and they've had a huge hit to their evaluation recently.
Right.
They're a traditional SaaS platform that, of course, has a lot of now AI powered and enabled features, right? With that being said, there's a lot of new AI native solutions that have been, up and comers, vibe coded, and people say, well, I could replace that project management solution tomorrow, right? And that has hurt this company's valuation. I mean, we're not talking about a small SaaS company. We're talking about a business that has 1.3 billion dollars in ARR and 1.5 billion dollars in cash. They are cash flow positive, right? Now, the thing that the CEO and founder mentioned in this podcast is that we're just the beginning, right? When AWS created the cloud, it gave opportunities to many others. That's the same thing that we're going to see with the LLM. And
Yeah.
those opportunities are not just going to come to only AI native businesses. Software as a service is going to explode from it as well. The TAM of software is just going to grow as businesses continue to flip that equation of spending the majority of their cash on people and a sliver on technology. Those two are going to flip, right? That's just going to continue to increase the total addressable market for technology businesses in all industries. And I think that procurement and supply chain technology, we're just at the beginning of it.
Yeah. There's much more I wanted to get to, but I want to get this last question in the few minutes we have left. Want to ask this as a two-part question to you, and that is that many people listening, procurement organizations, leaders out there, they may say, okay, I'm going to make this jump. I'm going to go do a supplier relationship management. Um, but they need to make the case. And you talked a little bit about this. So the question is basically this. Can you make the case as to why having a strong supplier relationship management program is important for your procurement organization? And the second part of that is, can you offer three practical steps that maybe these leaders can say, how do I get started? So what three things should they do today? Get them on this journey.
Sure. So, in the words of Yannick Thierry, who I heard speak at an event not super long ago from Bain and Company, the best time to get started is yesterday. And if you can't do that, then tomorrow's just fine, right? So I would say get started, go and look at the market, find vendors that are out there. There's amazing resources to do so. The ProcureTech 100 is a great place to look. The Hackett as well, vendors to know, vendors to watch is another great place to look as well, another top 100.
Yeah,
G2, Capterra, and alike, another great place to look. Find the vendors that fit you. Utilize the LLMs to be able to do your research, right? Put in who you are as a business, what your requirements are, and of course, get out there and get active in the market. Okay. That's the first step. Um, from there, I think, is building the blocks for change internally, right? And that includes, of course, building a strong ROI driven and COI driven business case. You have to have cash to be able to change, right? And the last piece is, of course, acting. I mean, when it's all said and done, I know that that sounds ridiculous, but not being okay, right? The paralysis by analysis that I think goes across all functions of the business, whether you're looking to adopt new technology or trying to launch a new product or whatever it might be. Act, don't wait, don't overthink it, because while you're overthinking it, your competitor is acting, failing, learning, and reiterating, right? And I think that for me, that's the most important thing to be able to inspire or educate anyone on, right? And I think that if you're in the status quo, let's talk. But I think that there is it's a reminder here today that so are 72 other percent of the market.
yeah, yep. You're just like everybody else out there, but you don't have
Correct.
to be. You don't have to
Correct.
be. So, Sam, thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to have you on. Um, People listening, they may want to get in touch with Kodiak Hub, or maybe they want to listen to your own podcast, right? I mean, you dive much deeper into this topic than I do, I'm sure. So, where can people find Kodiak Hub or your podcast?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. KodiakHub.com. If you want to get in touch with one of our SRM experts, you can do so there or just learn more about us. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn. We have fun content all the time. Our marketing team is amazing. If you want to connect with me, LinkedIn is a great way to be able to do so. We do have a podcast called The Way We Source. We release an episode every other week. And of course, I think that you should continue to listen on to the episodes here. With that being said, Brian, we got to have you on, my friend.
We'll set up a time. We'll make that happen.
Sounds like a
So,
plan. I'll
appreciate it.
hold you to it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Somebody's going to hold me to something, right? I don't know. I'm left on my own
Got to keep
devices.
you on the
I'm
straight and narrow, you know?
yeah. I'm my own worst enemy on things. So got to have somebody to hold me responsible. But definitely need that. That's why I'm married, and I actually make sure I am where I need to be when I'm supposed to be there. So that's great.
Always good to have.
Yeah. So thank you again, Sam. Appreciate it. We are out of time. I want to thank my guest today, Sam Jenks, of the Chief Revenue Officer at Kodiak Hub and the host of the Way We Source podcast, for joining me today. So check those out. Great topics and great content he puts out. Of course, a big thank you to all of you out there who took time out of your day to listen to us today. We greatly appreciate it. So thank you. New episodes of Talking Supply Chain are released on Thursdays. You can find them on scmr.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Until next time, this is Brian Straight. Thank you for listening.
Talking Supply Chain is produced by Supply Chain Management Review and Peerless Media. You can find it on scmr.com, supplychain247.com, iTunes, Google Podcasts, or wherever you find your podcasts. For more information on this topic or to sign up for our weekly newsletter, a print or a digital subscription to our publication, visit scmr.com. We hope you will join us for our next episode. For Supply Chain Management Review, I'm Brian Straight, and thank you for listening.